Good morning, Lagos, and thank you for staying with us. You're listening to Smooth 98.1, Smooth Breakfast with Valentine.
And Ayo Mairo Ese. Good morning, Lagos.
Welcome, Lagos, as we go into the detailed analysis of our newspaper stories. And to everyone around the world, please log on to www.smooth981.fm. You can listen to us live via YouTube and watch us as well. youtube.com/smooth981.fm.
Also, check us out on YouTube. On YouTube, you can check Smooth 98.1. On Twitter, it's Smooth 91 FM. Use the hashtag freshly pressed 981. And then, of course, you can check us out on WhatsApp 0809 444 0981. Please keep your comments coming through. Joining us for the conversation this morning, we have Mr. C. Good morning, Mr. C.
Good morning, Ayo. Welcome back, Valentine. Good morning, Nwaji.
Thank you.
Good morning, Lagos.
Good morning.
And Mr. C is at Mr. C with 5 E's on Twitter. And the corporate MC is here with us. Corporate to the K, Waji. Good morning, Waji.
Good morning, Ayo. Good morning, Valentine. Good morning, Big C. And good morning, Lagos.
Awesome. There's an Operation White in the stories. It'll be very interesting to go through that. But we start with this one from Daily Times. Daily Times report has this headline: I'll look into costs of governance. Buhari assures. Mr. C, what is this searchlight? As it says it's a beam searchlight on cost of governance without possible corruption exists anywhere. It's an advice, really, when he granted an audience to the members of the Presidential Advisory Committee Against Corruption. Why is this a rhetoric that has been reiterated again?
Okay, so a quick background to all of this. The Presidential Advisory Committee Against Corruption visited the president at Aso Rock, and it was during the course of that visit that the president did say, or was reported as saying, that he would beam a searchlight on the cost of governance and weed out possible corruption that exists anywhere. Now, this is just a general statement. There were no details, no specifics. And personally, I think this is just another soundbite, because he says he will beam a searchlight on the cost of governance. He doesn't tell us how he's going to do it. He doesn't tell us which arm of government he's looking at. But if I were to suggest a starting point, I would say the federal government. He should look at the executive branch first. Now, the Presidential Advisory Committee then made a number of suggestions. One, that there should be a passage of the Proceeds of Crime Bill, which is presently before the National Assembly, and that a Presidential Truth and Restitution Task Force should be set up. Now, they went there to get in to look at reducing the cost of governance. This proposed Presidential Truth and Restitution Task Force will require more funds. Now, what is it this proposed body is supposed to do that any of the existing bodies cannot do or is already doing? We have a penchant in this country for duplicating roles and bodies. That needs to stop. Now, the Presidential Advisory Committee also claimed that since 2015, a billionaire had been recovered from corrupt Nigerians, and this money was used in the social intervention programs for 2017 and 2018. The question arises, what is the proof of this statement?
Accountability details.
Yes. Who did you recover the 1 billion from? Don't they have names? What were the offenses? Did you recover all the money you should have recovered from them?
How much is left?
Yes. And then two, these social intervention programs, were they included in the budget? Were they effectively used in line with what was proposed in the budget? These are questions Nigerians need to ask.
Interesting questions raised there. Hopefully, we all hope for a lot of things. Let's move on very quickly to the next one. Just a quick reminder, you can send messages with the hashtag freshlypressed981 on our social media platforms and also on WhatsApp 0809 444 0981. In the continued conversation, lingering conversation on labor and the minimum wage, it seems to be the elephant has refused to sit down. The Minister of Labor and Employment, Senator Chris Ngige, Thursday attributed the challenges being experienced so far in reaching an agreement on, quote, full implementation of the new minimum wage increase caused by the impasse over the consequential adjustment of the minimum wage for grade levels 7 to 17. To the wrong interpretation of the increase by the organized labor. how do you agree to something when you haven't understood the clarity, or you haven't got clarity as to the how this is going to play out, how it's going to favor you, who had the responsibility to make these things clear? Because if you, before you sit down with people to do any negotiations, you should understand the terms of engagement, and these are necessary the details that I would assume as an ordinary human being should have been discussed before now. But why are we here, Nwaji?
Well, Valentine, I think you hit the nail on the head. You are an ordinary human being, and not trying to cast any aspersions on the people who are going through this particular process to label them as not ordinary, because they're quite spectacular. The irony is this, right? Whenever you go through any kind of review when it comes to remuneration, right, you have to involve the Office of Budget and Fiscal Policies to be able to now guide you with regards to the policies, the procedures, and how those computations now work out. Their compensation and benefits calculations and formulas that you need to use to arrive at figures that now speak towards what this increase in minimum wage is. And the mere fact that Chris Ngige is alluding to the fact that that wasn't done is scary. Okay? Either it's scary or he's just playing coy and playing politics so that he could now scuttle the process, or just maybe label the incumbent government as not knowing what they're doing. There could be a range of reasons why this is happening. But bottom line, this continues to go and show the issues that we have within our government, which is that we have a complete situation where we don't have experts in the back office. And that's what is happening, and everything now becomes politicized. Because what now happens is that if you have your compensation and benefits experts in there, your budget and your fiscal guys in there, then this is not a conversation. They will spend months going through different permutations, different calculations, working through the formulas to now arrive at what those figures look at. Because when you now begin to look at those things, I think one of the key components that was raised in the article is that there was not an evaluation of all earnings in the public service, because you have to factor those things in when you now begin to look at it state by state to now take into consideration the viability of this particular increase. So I see where Chris Ngige is coming from. My fear is that he may just be playing politics. And once again, we don't have all the facts. But once again, to your absolute point, Valentine, is that why wasn't this completely thrashed out, politics or not, before we now went to now make on this grand statement? And that's just the problem we have, because it just continues to expose that we don't have experts in government, we don't have technocrats in government, we don't have the highly intellectual people driving the civil service, which is what you need. So regardless of whatever politicians are in place, you need to have the deep competence individuals in there that can now begin to run your government, and that's a challenge.
So just to add to what Nwaji said, yes, the government clearly didn't think this through, but I also blame Labour, because what were you proposing? What were you expecting? If the last man on the last rung of the ladder was being moved to 30,000,
what do you think was going to happen?
Shouldn't Labour have considered the ripple effect on all the levels in front of the last man? So what exactly did they agree to before the election?
Especially considering the previous agreement that it had in the last time they made this kind of negotiation. It all came down to 900 naira.
Yeah, but even Labour's compromised. We know that, So once again, thank you for that point. It cuts across, because these behaviors that we're referring to is not only in government, but it's also in these particular unions that are meant to represent the people, and it's a shame.
Yes,
and something he points to in this story as well.
Yeah.
Right, MI from Akoka reacting to the first story says, if we can't make as much money as we want to, at least we can cut down the cost. The overhead of running government in Nigeria is very insensitive to the status quo. It just added more ministries, so where is the sound bite coming from? At MI, then Vincent from Adiba says, Buhari telling us that he wants to reduce cost of governance is story. He should start with the executives and legislators. They are milking the country dry.
I have zero tolerance for corruption, is what the Chief Justice of Nigeria is saying from this Thisday report. He declared this in a swift reaction to an allegation of a plot by the All Progressives Congress to alter and jettison the composition of the proposed 7-member panel that will consider the judgments of the Presidential Election Petition Tribunal. Sounding tough? Is it convincing enough for you, Nwaji?
Are you asking me? You want me to answer that question, Valentine?
No.
Are you sure? No. Okay. No, he asked. I just wanted to make sure.
Yeah. No. Honestly, really. I mean, how do you see?
Okay. I'm trying. Okay?
Try.
All right. It sounds fantastic.
It does.
The platitudes that come with it are absolutely wonderful to hear and everything else. But my issue is this, right? You need to convince people that you're really about your business by throwing a few people in jail. And that's the only way that we can actually begin to believe the narrative with which you are pushing.
And a few people being his own people.
That's precisely what I'm referring to. That's the only way that we are actually going to believe that you do not stand for corruption. But let's take it a step back, all right? Why do we even get to this place in the beginning? Why should justices or judges now be compromised to begin with? And it's not necessarily about how much they earn. I know that plays a big part into it because they have to be paid well enough and looked well enough for them not to be able to be open to corruption. That's one. But I think there's another behavior, deeper personality profile that you need to have if you want to occupy that particular position, which now begins to speak to your adaptability acceptance, all right? And one, you're very unlikely to adapt to either good or bad things. So if you have that ranking to show that, look, you're not an adaptable individual, then it shows that you are very unlikely to be susceptible to corruption. So I'm not sure if we run through these kind of psychometric assessments when we're now, considering who these individuals should be, but I think we need to look at how people are naturally constituted as individuals to now begin to wonder if their emotional maturity is even allowing them from a principal point of view to now be open to those kind of things, because no matter what, you are who you are. And so no matter your qualifications, no matter your intentions or your ambitions or anything else, but there are some deep rooted things that are a result of how you were born, how you were bred, whatever the case may be, that you cannot run away from. So I think in part of that consideration, we need to come up with these particular profile reports to now show that, that this individual, no matter what happens, he's very unlikely to move the needle when it comes to these particular things. That's actually, for me, the root of how you begin to tackle these individuals, is people with the right personality profiles in these positions, and then you can now begin to build from that particular point on. That's just my opinion. So going back to the CJN's point, it sounds fantastic. You need to make a few examples, but you also need to now review the selection process of how these people get in.
Just one quick point.
Yes, please.
I want Lagos to remember this. The CJN had expressed the readiness of the Supreme Court for any eventuality, adding that it is well prepared to keep the country together as one indivisible entity through effective justice delivery. Now, the merit of any case require that each case is decided solely on its merits and not extraneous factors like the indivisible continuity of Nigeria.
Which is a compromise within itself.
Lagos and Nigerians should remember this statement. I'm done.
All right. Thank you.
Well, Shaw seems to find the statements that has psychometric assessments in government quite funny. He's saying that psychometric, he cannot believe that they would really agree to doing this.
No, of course they won't, Ayo, because half of those guys are crazy. So there's no way they will agree to it, but it doesn't change the process, in my personal opinion.
But there's a fear that if this psychometric assessments are applied, it could it will reveal a lot of rot in the system, and then bringing out the rots or trying to cast away the bad eggs or the bad apples. You might be forced to go back to examine the cases that they presided over and check the merits of their judgments.
All right, let me clear back my position. So to do that, that's you're talking. None of us will be alive when that actually comes to fruition. So I'm referring to moving forward.
Yes.
So with the selection of any new justices going forward, that's the point I'm trying to make. Let's now begin to institute this particular process so that we can now make sure we have a clean slate. But to now do this whole backlog. Oh, good Lord.
I think even beyond the judges, all civil servants.
It goes down, yeah. And just to shamelessly plug, there are organizations that do run these psychometric assessments. Phillips Consulting Limited, working with Thomas International, does these psychometric assessments very, very well. So yeah, put that in there.
All right. Thank you.
And a woman today is pointing to the fact that talking about labor and the minimum wage conversation, that it was hurriedly signed by the president, who read it and signed before the election as the election was around the corner, because a lot of people alluded to the fact that he made a hasty decision because he wanted to please a few people to get votes. And that's a suspicion, or rather a rumor, that was spread, and everybody held strong to that. And it just kept going on. But name calling wouldn't naturally make the truth stand out.
Absolutely. Now, Kenneth says this has become critical. Just come and see the chaotic traffic situation. Chaotic traffic, people suffering. Please tell the government that this can no longer wait till after the rain. So on the roads.
Mhm.
And then back to the NLC story, Yinka says the earlier the better. We know that the composition of the NLC are a bunch of not too intelligent guys, the better for all of us. Rather all the intelligent ones that should take the forefront of NLC are bailing out of the country. Is it rocket science not to see the pitfalls of the 30,000 naira increase? The same guys will come to fight against subsidy removal, and we all tag along when it's clearly hurting the country.
All right. Mr. C, let's talk about this story, this report of the Punch newspaper. Federal government inaugurates team to track fuel distribution. I've lost count of how many committees that have been set up in the past year. And this year alone, they've inaugurated a team of 89 persons drawn from 5 agencies to ensure transparency and accountability in the distribution of petroleum products across the country. Let's examine the merits of this group. They're called Operation White.
Okay, so once again, the federal government takes a decision that is completely difficult to understand.
Why is it difficult?
I will explain. How do you inaugurate a team of 89 persons to track fuel distribution in the 21st century with technology that is available to everyone?
Beyond the number, I know technology is a far cry. Let's not just go
No, we have
the
to
conversation.
No, Valentine, you can't.
No.
I'm
sorry.
The number is the problem.
Val.
I'm saying ignore the number. I'm saying don't look at the number as a ballpark figure, because they're saying it's drawn, 89 persons drawn from different agencies that are involved in this conversation.
Val. Petrol is picked up from the depot, right?
Mhm.
Now, to pick up petrol from the depot, you must submit documentation. That documentation indicates where you're coming from and where the petrol is going to. It's not rocket science.
Radio.
Yes, whatever they call it, there's documentation. Now, it's a simple matter of confirming at the supposed end destination whether the petrol actually got there. That is what the DPR is meant to do. That is what the DPR is funded for.
I see your point.
So this is just ridiculous. Now, the GMD of the NNPC is quoted as saying that when the land borders were closed, daily petrol consumption dropped from 60 million liters to 52 million liters a day. And he's linking the two events together. That is lazy analysis. And I will explain why.
Okay.
Is it possible that during the same period that the land borders were closed, there was increased power supply in the country? Most of the petrol consumed in Nigeria is used to fuel petrol generators.
Yeah, but there were also reports that most of the petroleum products were smuggled out of the country.
We know that there has been petrol smuggling out of Nigeria because the price in Nigeria makes it very lucrative to smuggle petrol out and sell it for twice the value here. Now, that is an indictment of the Nigerian Customs Service, which is supposed to be guarding our borders. They're not doing their jobs. Nobody's calling them out. And then we now inaugurate a new body to stop smuggling of petrol across the borders. Now, what jurisdiction do they have? This body that has been set up, what legal jurisdiction or powers does it have? Can it arrest a smuggler?
All right, so no face in this particular team. Thank you, Mr. C. Now we'll move on to other stories. I'll come to you, Nwaji, for this. Lagos Assembly threatens to arrest Ambode others. So the Lagos State House of Assembly yesterday threatened to issue a warrant of arrest on former Governor Akinwumi Ambode and others who served under him as commissioners. Reason is to investigate the 820 buses purchased by Ambode to appraise to appraise the 2019 media budget. Let's talk about this story, please.
What is there to actually talk about? I mean,
review the merit of their
what?
issue of a warrant, the investigation of the buses he purchased. They've talked about the fact that he didn't follow due process. We've also, just in the story, one of the stories today, during the Labour and versus the federal government, that didn't they think this through? It wasn't a plan for before they reached an agreement, and we're seeing this playing out again in the at state level, whereby they're accusing the former governor of using the refund of the Paris Club for the purchase of the buses without the approval of the House.
Okay, so and no other emeritus Lagos State governor has done what Ambode did. We just want Ambode. I mean, look, I get it, all right, and you have to, for whatever reason, politics or deviated or he parted ways with the party, however you want to put it. So you want to come after him and make sure he learns his lesson and whip him into shape. But this is just ridiculous.
But it's really so like what we talk about anti-graft war at the federal level, where we say that it's a witch hunt. I'm like, okay, but if it's a witch hunt and your hands are clean, fine. But if it's a witch hunt and you're actually guilty, people just
but okay,
want...
I get that, and that is the logical explanation for behavior. But if you're going to do that, then trust me, Ambode is not the only person in question. If you're going to do that, it goes all the way to the top. I'm not going to mention who's at the top of that list because I'm just not going to do that. But if you're going to do that, can you take it all the way to the top? Because Ambode was not operating alone. Okay, and I'm not referring to the people that he directly reported to him.
So
I'm referring to the people that he directly reported to.
All right. Thank you very much. And perhaps that's what we should start calling for.
Yeah.
So when we see people, rather than say that, it's a witch hunt, let's also call for the persecution of others who are involved.
I think we should.
So if you're looking for that fairness and openness, then let it be a commission that goes after all these things, not just one individual.
Because when you mentioned anti-graft war, because that in a general sense is like sweeping a whole room. But are we just packing the dirt that is accumulated in
Just one very small corner of Valentine.
So we're not sweeping the entire room.
No, not even half the room, just like a small corner.
Wow.
Yeah.
All right, thank you very much. Perhaps also our eyes should be on due process being followed in this administration with regards to contracts being awarded.
No, it's your intention behind what you're trying to accomplish when it comes to anti-graft. Okay, so don't use anti-graft to now go after your enemies, so to speak. That's just my issue.
So the Lagos state government is notoriously legendary for being opaque with its transactions. I will give you just 2 examples. The flyover from Osinbajo that joins the 5 Cowrie Creek Bridge. Till date, no Lagosian knows how much was spent to construct that ramp.
No, we do.
No, it was never published. Trust me.
Okay.
I know because I worked on that transaction.
Oh, wow.
Then the Ikoyi Link Bridge. No one knows how much that cost.
So shouldn't we be making a demand for more transparency in government, particularly with the Freedom of Information Act?
Yes, but if you're not involved in the process that throws up your leaders and your representatives, that Freedom of Information Act will not be complied with.
All right. Messages. Wrote to me from Ambode says the fight against corruption should start with government officials. Whoever is guilty of any corruption offense should face the music without sentiment. More so, government should reduce the cost of governance and make elective positions unattractive. Our government should be proactive and live up to its responsibility. And Vincent says from Adeba says, why is this silent or salient in Lagos? The former governor Ambode and his commissioners should speak out and stop playing ostrich. Keeping mute gives room for speculations and all sorts of insinuations. Mark Zorin says, good morning, guys. It's me doing and not assume that monitoring petroleum import is so easy. Papi K says, Ambode is an elephant in a Chinese store. A handle with care, we know what we know. Says, all politicians seem selfish, self-centered, and only think of themselves. Ambode does not have to defend himself. Remember, he knows what he knows. His experiences have shown that he knows all the Nollywood drama involved. He does not need to make noise like the chicken. He's playing the duck and who is quiet when the cheek is picked up by the hawks.
All right. Let's move on to our next story, budget. Well, another update on the budget. But before we talk about budget, actually, let's look at the P&ID and updates on the P&ID situation. So, according to this update from Thisday, Nigeria pays P&ID £250,000 ordered by the UK courts. I remember we spoke about this here. Will they pay? Should there are conditions attached to the ruling? Well, let's talk about this. See, what do you have to say about it?
Okay, previously on P&ID, the Nigerian government was ordered to pay the sum of £250,000 to P&ID by the British Commercial Court as running costs, and also to pay security deposit of $1 million into the court account. Now, Nigeria had 14 days within which to pay the £250,000, which is report indicates they did, but they haven't paid the $200 million security cost, and this report indicates that they've appealed that order. Now, I don't know the basis for appealing the order, but the court did make it clear that without that $200 million being paid, there will be no conditional grant or stay of execution. The legal implication of that is, if at the expiration of the 60-day period given by the British Commercial Court, if Nigeria has not paid the $200 million deposit, there's no stay of execution anywhere, and P&ID is at liberty to enforce the judgment, to commence garnishee proceedings in which Nigeria will not be heard and execute the arbitral award.
All right, but it's also important to note in this report that the Minister of Information and Culture has come out to say that they're still insisting that the contract is fraudulent and that they've sent a delegation to the UK to overturn the judgment of the London court.
Excuse me, the minister is not a court.
All right. But they're in the process of trying to overturn the judgment.
Now, yeah, you see, an arbitral award,
How?
people need
So
to.
they're going to fight it.
See, look, please, they should stop misleading Nigerians. There's a process for overturning arbitral awards, and Nigeria cannot use any of those procedures right now. You have to allege that there was fraud on the part of the arbitrators or they misapplied the law. I'm not sure Nigeria can establish any of those grounds.
Why without proof? What's that element?
Because the contract was awarded legally.
No. It's not even about the contract now. You have to show that the arbitral process was flawed. The process leading up to the award. Yes. This is not a Nigerian judgment that you overturn and do all sorts of shenanigans with. This is the proper arbitral award that was made. Nigeria was present at that award. I do not know what case they presented, and it's late in the day to be presenting the case they want to present. They should stop misleading Nigerians about this.
All right, thank you very much. So back to the budget. Buhari Osinbajo to spend 3.3 billion naira on foreign local trips. In the past few days since the president presented the budget 2020 to the House, we've been talking about different elements and different aspects of the budget. Today, the focus is on the amount allocated to travel as well as food in this report from the Punch newspaper. Why do you take us through the story?
Okay, the first story that C covered was that Buhari assures Nigerians that he's going to look into the cost of governance. And we now have this particular story that speaks to the very cost of governance when it relates to food and when it relates to travel. And when you now begin to look at these amounts, you're talking about 3.3 billion naira on foreign and local trips. It now breaks it down further. You look at things that are going to be spent on private jet costs. You now begin to look at things that are going to be spent on food stuffs. I don't even know what that means. Looking at 149 million naira and all these particular. Now, what I want people to understand is that the reasons why we cannot get past this exorbitant amounts of money when it comes to how we operate government is that we have to look at the history of it. We inherited our current form of government from the colonial masters, all right? And the colonial masters operated in this particular region because this was a hardship post. So because it was a hardship post, the British government allocated to them certain leisures and laxities that did not exist in the United Kingdom because they wanted their lives to be somewhat seamless here, which is why they gave them lavish houses with gardens and swimming pools, and they gave them staff, and they gave them drivers, and all these particular allocations. Now, when the fight for independence came in, we did not have any particular form of national government, so we pretty much adopted what we saw. So everything that was handed over to us was a form of how the colonial government ran its administration in Nigeria, which is part of why the executive operates the way that it does, because we literally just cut and paste what they were doing. So until we understand and appreciate that what we are doing is not normal, especially in a country that has the kind of issues that we have, we're never going to move past it, because we have legalized and institutionalized these particular behaviors and systems, which is why the cost of government continues to be what it is, because it's just no longer in your paradigm to think that this is no longer normal, because all you know is that this is what happens, and you only know that because it's what we inherited. So until we now reorientate how we now begin to look at this particular perspective with regards to what the cost of governance is, we are never going to get anywhere. So you see, that's why Buhari can easily say, I'm going to look at the cost of governance and then continue to have budgetary allocations for 3.3 billion naira for travel and for food.
And Aroy on YouTube actually adds a word to that. He said, I'll look into it. Is equal to I'll think about it or I'll get back to you.
Exactly.
And more messages. Mazi on Twitter says, reduce government expenditure. Every time we talk, but no action. Everything about the civil services is bloated. Sit down and map out cuts. National Assembly first. Chukwuma Wosu says, good morning, guys. There are frontier technologies by which we can monitor petrol distribution. But the truth is, right from the NNPC to the retail outlets, there's a conspiracy of silence that promotes it. And messages. This one says, I stand with Ayo.
On the Ambode saga, if you're found guilty, please let him be prosecuted. He can therefore mention names of people involved, no matter how high they are.
And Bidemi says, 2019 budget got missing just before Ambode left office, but was passed into law by Sanwo-Olu. probe Ambode for it. Well,
Thank you. That's my point.
Mm.
That's my point about this whole thing. Let's not make a mockery of the system. That's all I'm saying.
all right, a final message before we go. Showmi says, we need to know the financial state of Lagos State, the cash flow revenue generated, the running cost of governance,
Well, we know that
and
stuff.
money spent on various projects is shrouded in secrecy. We need to know
It's not
how
really-
the taxpayers taxpayers' money have been spent in the last 20 years. It is our right to know. 20 years? Let's start from now, though. Hi, Waji. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Valentine.
Thank you, Mr. C.
You're welcome.
You can check out Waji on social media at the corporate MC. Spell the corporate with a K there, and then Mr. C is Mr. C with 5 E's after that. And Ayo and myself are here for the locker room next with Tega. Stay with us here on Smooth 98.1.
Music is like
Guys, Lagos State doesn't hide any of their IGR or any
They
of
don't
their
have us.
No,